So I was reading the first issue of Suicide Squad Dream Team when I was hit with something you don't see often in professional comics. This arrow. It actually confused me for a second if this was part of the scene or something, but no. It's a visual signifier to the reader of where to read next, a guide for their eyes. This sort of thing was somewhat common in the early days of comic books, along with numbered panels to direct the reader. But as time progressed and the art of sequential storytelling evolved, artists learned to design pages that guide readers through visuals alone. Nowadays, arrows and numbered panels appear archaic, unprofessional, usually only seen in amateur work on the level of Sonichu. Now, imagine with me for a moment that you've never seen a comic in your entire life and need to figure out how to read it. Since I'm an English speaker, I would follow the rules of my language. Just as in a book, I would move my eyes from left to right, then move down diagonally to the beginning of the next row of panels and progress like that. A comic operates the same way, but being a medium often made of both visuals and text means where the eyes go next can be a bit more complicated. Do I read this dialogue first? What about the narration? Or am I supposed to look at this background element? In a well-crafted comic, you should be able to naturally follow reading rules to cleanly guide you through the page. This concept is called visual flow, and it's where Suicide Squad Dream Team failed. That arrow is a sign of either lack of confidence in the reader or a failure of the artist. And I'm gonna place this one on the penciler Eddie Barrows, as there are a few other strange visuals in here. Like this one of Harley talking to Dreamer, but she first appears as a close-up looking at the reader when she could just be standing next to her, which is exactly what is done on the next page. I probably wouldn't have paid much attention to these issues if it wasn't for that jarring, archaic arrow. It got me thinking about visual flow, and it reminded me of a master in the subject, the late great Akira Toriyama. If you haven't been living in some remote part of the Amazon jungle your whole life, the name Akira Toriyama should be instantly recognizable. He's the mangaka behind the cultural juggernaut that is Dragonball. Before Dragonball, and even before his manga career, Toriyama worked in the advertising industry, fine-tuning his craft through the art of graphic design. Now, this might sound strange, but an advertisement is a lot like a one-page comic. Like a comic, an ad often mixes text and visuals to inform the reader, often through some kind of narrative. With people's ever-dwindling attention spans, this all needs to grab the viewer's attention and get them absorbing as much information as possible in a split second in order to plant the idea of buying in the target's head. This means visual flow should come automatically to the viewer, unconsciously. As an example, here's an ad for Listerine mouthwash. We start with the big and bold, Listerine, power to your mouth. Immediately, we're hit with the product name and tagline, a bold statement about the product that implies strength. Our eyes are pulled down to the cool mint Listerine bottle, giving us a visual of the actual product. This bottle is swarmed by mammoth, ice, polar bears, clouds, and mint leaves. These all hit you with the ideas of size, strength, ice cold, calm, refreshing, minty. And all of that information is understood almost immediately upon seeing it. Even if you didn't consciously think about each individual element, they all come together to present an idea, a feeling that should be associated with the product. That is visual flow. I believe this experience informed Toriyama's use of visual flow in his manga. Let's look at the first page of Dragonball, a single panel page, or a splash page as it's known. It introduces us to our protagonist. Now, most of you probably know this character as Goku, but notice his name's not even on the page. That'll come up later. Keep in mind, being a Japanese manga, instead of left to right, our visual flow goes right to left. Start in the top right with some narration, our intro to the story, a bit of flavor text on what's to come. Looking left, we spot some cute monkeys, ones that pop distinctly with their cartoony antics against the more detailed environment, a mountainous wilderness. We're guided downward to the speech bubble of a boy. His chill personality is apparent, and a bit of humor in calling a monkey your brother. His face and unkempt hair display youth and a wild nature. The next place our eyes are guided to is the oversized saw he's carrying. It clearly should be too big for such a small boy. That's strange. But next, we notice a tail? Clearly this is not a normal boy, which gives us a little bit of intrigue and connects him further to the monkeys, making the bro comment a little bit funnier. And lastly, we see the boy is traveling by log, rolling it with his feet like a wheel. We can surmise he used that large saw to cut that large log and now uses it for transport. From just this page, so much information is gained, and it's all laid out through expertly guided sequential flow. Before we even know our character's name, we learn so much about Goku here. He's a carefree wild boy living in the mountains who is clearly unique, very strong and nimble, and has some kind of connection to monkeys. Still with me? Good. Let's look at a page with multiple panels, dialogue, and characters. Here's one from Chapter 5. We start off in the top right with the old woman's dialogue. The tail of the speech bubble draws us to her face so we know who's talking. Then the tail of the next speech bubble gives us the questioning dialogue, and right below it, we can see the subject, the Dragon Ball in her hand. We continue on to Bulma and Goku's reactions, and go further to see the confused father and daughter looking on. Go further down the page, and we get a joke setup. Seems a monster named Oolong is terrorizing the town, and Bulma will use Goku to defeat him in exchange for the Dragon Ball. We get Bulma's exclamation, we see the confident assuredness of her plan, and then these. What are these? They're action lines. They're a way to convey movement in a still image. These lines guide us toward Bulma's outstretched finger. You're probably picturing the motion of her arm right now, aren't you? And we get more of her dialogue, which trails off, pause as our eyes move to the next row, to be hit with Goku patting the old woman's crotch. A continuation of a running gag that Goku just learned boys and girls have different parts, and this is now how he identifies them. We then get Bulma comedically falling off panel, a common gag reaction in manga for the time. To add more to the joke, Goku casually exclaims, "You're a girl too!" To which the old lady blushes, and we're guided to Bulma's humorous reaction, a face fault, another common trope in manga. Using visual flow techniques, we're guided through dialogue, characters, and actions in a seamless way that gets us all the information that we need. We even get a whole gag set up, even using the act of adjusting your eyes to a new roll of panels to make the comedic visual hit like a surprise. Getting the hang of this? Good. Now let's see how Toriyama does action scenes. Here's Chapter 8, where Goku, Bulma, and Oolong meet the thieves, Yamcha and Puar. Yeah, the meme guy who dies a lot. He used to be kind of competent. We're gonna go a bit faster now that we've got the hang of things. Action lines guide us to Goku's pole smacking down on Yamcha's sword, the guac onomatopoeia resonating out of the clash like sound waves. You can practically hear it in your head. Feel it. Goku leaps backward. Yamcha charges. Goku commands his pole to grow, stretching to the other end of the panel. Moving to the next row provides a pause, a beat, giving emphasis to the pole growing longer. The pole extends out from off panel and hits Yamcha in the stomach, knocking him back with an implied force that is absolutely clear. Here's another quick scene. Oolong tries to escape by turning into a fly. This action line showing the path of his zooming escape. He's getting away. Yamcha sends Puar to chase. Puar transforms into a fly swatter, which swats Oolong down. Now, as I said, all of this happens pretty naturally. You don't have to think about all of this to work, and that's the point. Toriyama crafts images that convey direction and action seamlessly. Just like advertising, grabbing and informing the reader on a product in a split second, the still images of Dragon Ball come to life in your mind through your eyes in split seconds. It flows in. Akira Toriyama is an undeniable master of manga, practically defining the shonen action genre for decades. That's boys action for you non-weebs. It's the category of stuff like Naruto and One Piece. These are comics that don't just focus on showing fight scenes, but making those fight scenes feel alive. But you know where I don't often see that? Western comics. In fact, I'd say visual flow is something a lot of American comics just ignore or simply fail to consider. Western comics solidified their presence in America during the 30s, but manga only took root after World War II, so they do pull from different inspirational sources. Osamu Tezuka is often lauded as the grandfather of manga. He created Astro Boy, Kimba the White Lion, Cyborg 009, and multiple shelves worth of other classics. His work was inspired by the movies of Walt Disney, smooth motions and expressive actions, using abstracted, rounded characters that lend well to expression in a visual medium, where animators would need to draw characters in multiple poses dozens and dozens of times. They also tend to be appealingly cute, Compare a Tezuka manga to a comic running at the same time, and it's quite clear how much more expressive the manga is. Now, from my experience with American comics, they often seem more concerned with making a solid, detailed picture, more like a series of still life paintings rather than stylized images meant to express motion and flow. Now, this is surprising considering the bread and butter of American comics is superheroes, which have a ton of action. So you'd think they'd want to make these action scenes have a sense of action. This philosophy is exemplified strongest by artist Alex Ross, actually does make still life paintings into comics. His art is hailed as the closest comics can get to photorealism without using literal photos. And despite criticisms of his work being stagnant, lacking a feeling of motion, every image from Ross is a masterwork. Each panel a painting that conveys emotion, expression, and makes the world feel alive. His books like Kingdom Come become narrative art galleries. Unfortunately, not everyone is Alex Ross, and when action scenes happen, they don't always provide visual flow very well. I'm gonna have to be a bit mean here and pick out a comic I think has pretty poor visual flow. This is 2015's Karnak, starring the Marvel Inhuman character of the same name. Let's go over a few action scenes. Here's one from issue 2. Karnak chops the guy's neck. Good use of smear as action lines to replicate live-action motion blur. Then another kick to the right, showing he's kicking the same guy. Another goon approaches, and Karnak explodes his gun. Then, fingers in the eyes. So far, so good. Next page. Karnak walks in, facing left, which would work better if he faced right for visual flow, but that's a minor detail. Karnak clenches his fist as goons charge from down the hall. He ducks back behind the doorway to dodge fire, then strikes a goon as he approaches. Next page. Solid punch to the face. Karnak uses his other hand to lift the second goon as the others approach. Then throws the man into the goons, but wait, who is he stepping on? Was it the first guy he punched? It can't be, because he's behind Karnak in panel 2. So it's the guy he lifted? Did he put him down and then throw another guy? It's confusing. Last panel shows what I think is him preparing to jump off of a wall, but it's a little too tight to actually tell. Next page, Karnak is doing a kick downward on a guy, again facing left instead of right. Then we get this huge downward axe kick. Very powerful use of action lines, and oh, actually, that was an upward kick to the guy's jaw. So our eyes are drawn down, but then go back up? Then Karnak kicks the guy in the jaw and down kicks on the same guy, another guy. Skip a bit, and Karnak enters the room and punches something, and if you look closely enough, you can see its shrapnel sent flying, and then the pieces are just in their faces. No action lines, no real sense of movement. You can see so many places where visual flow is interrupted or fails in ways that could be fixed quite easily, and it makes these fights seem disjointed and stiff. And the more I started thinking back on the Western comics I've read, I realized this issue was pretty common. Now, to be fair, comparisons to Toriyama will result in 99% of artists paling in comparison. And I'm not here to say Karnak is trash, but my wider point is that the visual flow issues in Karnak are issues that I see in a lot of Western comics. Punches that lack force, weight, or direction, oddly laid out speech bubbles, that sort of thing. While the origins of Western comics and manga I mentioned earlier are a factor, it also comes down to how these comics are produced. Manga is typically produced by 1-2 max main creators, along with some assistants to do busy work like filling in blacks and background details. On top of that, the schedule of a mangaka is notoriously brutal. Ichiro Oda of One Piece fame displayed his work schedule, where he has barely 4 hours of free time a week. He famously worked himself into the hospital and now has to take breaks every 3rd week to prevent death. Western comics are typically a team effort, with steps of the process divided. Script, pencils, inks, coloring, lettering are assigned to a person each. These are all often headed up by an editor. This means poor communication and synergy can result in elements that may look fine on their own, but once placed together, feel like a patchwork mess. This is what I suspect happened with Suicide Squad Dream Team. Now, when you get into indie comics, crowdfunded and homegrown and such, these teams are typically smaller, with one person taking on many responsibilities. And these works tend to have a lot more personality and flow to them. And I think that's a big flaw of Western comics. Even with an average monthly release schedule, each of these steps need to be given their time, and often, one can't work without the completion of the other. So what you have in a way is an assembly line process to creating a comic. And if suddenly the script changes, the art needs to change with it. And if the artist isn't informed in time, it could mean you end up with art that no longer works with the panels and dialogue. This can result in poorly ordered speech bubbles and visuals that lack flow. The fact most American comics are in full color also means even more time is necessary than the black and white standard of manga. Critiquing art is hard, not just because art is subjective, but also because it feels bad to tell a fellow creator their work is poor. I'm a writer, not an artist. I don't have the patience or diligence to draw pages of comics, which is why I pay other people better than me to do it. But I love Western comics in general. Superhero comics are my favorite comfort reads. But when I see an entire industry failing in the same obvious, easily corrected way, I can't help but think there's a problem. Manga vastly outsells American comics, and I think a huge reason for that is our bread and butter action comics tend to have honestly lackluster action. A classic term for a comic artist is a cartoonist. But it seems like manga takes more cues from cartoons and animation, while Western comics tend to emulate live action. They're more cinematic, still life. And there are plenty of cinematic comics that look great. A lot of Jonathan Hickman comics focus on beautiful set pieces, great designs, and dialogue. The currently running Flash comic has some of the most unique and beautiful concepts ever put to a comic page. It's beautiful, they're works of art. But I don't get the same feeling of motion, life, and flow that I do from manga. And I think more artists should learn from Akira Toriyama. I hope you learned something from this video, and if you're a Dragon Ball Z fan who has never experienced the original Dragon Ball, the anime is great, but I implore you to read the manga, drink from the source. Comment below the Western comics you think have great visual flow. Like and subscribe, and support yours truly as an independent comic creator by ordering the first issue of Brer Rabbit in the Jazz Age. Link in the description. You won't regret it. Until next time, keep on reading.